your team. Welcome to your house, and thank you for this opportunity to meet and for us to take part in this presentation from NMPASI. Before I move forward, I'd like to introduce the members that are present here with me today. I'll start with the person to my right is Representative Diego Vincent Camacho from Precinct 1. Uh, Myself, Speaker of the House, Edmund Villagomez. And to my left is Representative Edwin Probst, also from Precinct 1. And to his left is Representative Vincent Audan, Semen Audan Colbury from Precinct 1 as well. Across is our chairman for Health and Welfare, Representative Malcolm Omar. To his left is Representative Angelo Camacho. And to his left, Representative TJ Manglonia. Man, I get confused with the De La Cruz and Manglonia sometimes. So sometimes when I say your name, I'm like, did I get it right? Yeah. And to his left is Representative Denita Yanktamai, and to her left is Representative Roman Beneventi, which I'm pretty sure you're very familiar with. So welcome, and I'd like to give you the floor.
All right. Well, thank you all for having us come in and meet with you today. Again, my name is Greg Borja. I'm the Executive Director for NMPASI, the Northern Marianas Protection and Advocacy Systems Incorporated. I brought some of our team with me today. We wanted to take this opportunity just to greet you all and make you aware of our programs and services and how we may be of assistance to your constituents in your area. So it's pretty brief. We were basically established back in 1993, so we're going to be celebrating our 30th anniversary this September. We are a private nonprofit organization, and we operate with the mission to protect the civil, legal, and human rights of individuals with disabilities. We operate with two primary goals for our organization. The first one is that we are representatives of individuals with disabilities who have alleged rights violations here in the CNMI. The way we address those rights violations is in a number of ways. The first is advocacy, which is representation, support, or help. This is our advocacy staff here. They use administrative remedies for all different types of locations, organizations in terms of trying to address any rights violations for people with disabilities. We do have a attorney that is employed with us, an attorney. So she also provides legal advice and litigation if required. And we'll talk about some of the laws that we work with later on, but primarily she files grievances in the federal court here in the CNMI. We also have a unique power that's given to organizations like ours called Access Authority, where we're allowed to go into facilities that house or provide treatment or services to people with disabilities to conduct monitoring visits to ensure that their treatment is appropriate. They're not being unnecessarily restrained or secluded while receiving services. And then today we're here to do legislative advocacy, to inform you all about what we do, how we can help. In the past, we have also received copies of bills that are proposed that affect people with disabilities, where our attorney will give comment on those and whether we think it's going to be beneficial or if it might do harm. All right. The second goal we have is education and awareness. This is throughout our community, Saipan Tinian and Rhoda. We do talk about disability laws, and just to make people aware that there are laws out there that protect people with disabilities, and we want to ensure that everyone in our community is afforded those protections. We also go out to businesses, schools, other organizations, and we do etiquette and sensitivity training, how to work with people with disabilities. A lot of times we see people that may have a mental illness walking up and down the road, talking to themselves, and people might be afraid or not be sure how to approach them. And so we provide some training skills to assist with that. And finally, with education and training, we do promote self-advocacy for our individuals with disabilities. We want to give them the skills so that they can stand up and speak for themselves when it comes to addressing what problems that they may encounter. Our goal in life is that we're going to be we'll work ourselves out of business sooner or later, because everyone will be able to self-advocate. But in the many years that I've been with the organization, we're still moving towards that end goal. So we currently administer 8 federally funded programs. We have an ongoing formula grant cycle that comes to us. And so each of these programs is designed to assist a distinct population of people with disabilities. So you'll see that most of our programs start off with protection and advocacy. So we help individuals with developmental disabilities, those that have mental illness, individuals with traumatic brain injury, people looking for assistive technology, and so on. And then we have one program, the Client Assistance Program, where this is the quality assurance for the Office on Vocational Rehabilitation. So we work directly with them if there are any disputes for their services. This program specifically for that. And you'll see some of these pop up a little bit more. So again, we are an ongoing formula grant is how we receive our funding through, to stay in operation. And we receive our funding from three primary departments from the U.S. government. The first being the Department of Health and Human Services through the Administration on Community Living. They fund three of our grant programs. And then the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, they provide services or funding for one of our programs. The U.S. Department of Education, through the Rehabilitative Services Administration, provides funding for two of our programs. And then finally, the Social Security Administration, where we also have two programs through them too. Now, with the Social Security Administration, these two programs are specific to people who are receiving benefits already. We do assist through our other programs if there's issues with application or denial of benefits from Social Security. But once you are a beneficiary and you want to be employed, we have a program to help with that. If you're a person who has a representative payee or someone that takes care of your finances and there's misuse, we also have advocates that address those problems through corrective actions. Overall, in an annual year, we receive roughly $772,000, and you can see the breakdown here. About $655,000 goes through our personnel. We currently employ 12 individuals, including one on Tinian and one on Rhoda. And then the rest of our money goes for our administrative and general expenses. And this is where we pay for our power, our rent, our travel to and from Tinian and Rhoda, and any trainings and conferences that we have on island, or we go off island for trainings. We haven't received any local appropriations since probably 2003. I think we used to get about 40,000 in the past, like in the 90s. But then by 2003, we were down to like 15,000. 2004, we stopped receiving any local money. We have received some funding from the Saipan and Northern Islands Legislative Delegation that has helped us tremendously when it comes to some of our indirect expenditures, like for our rental and the power and whatnot. So that has been a great help for us this last year. We also did receive money through the local ARPA distribution, about $222,000. We are on track to complete the spending by the end of this fiscal year. And so that again has been a great help with us to overcome some of the things going on with the pandemic, especially purchasing equipment so that we can work remotely and have our the protective devices and whatnot when we initially started going back into the community, into the hospital and whatnot. So almost finally, I just talk to you all real briefly about some of the laws that we do provide education and awareness about. The first one, the Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act. This was originally created in 1975. It was amended in 2004. This gave funding and the designation throughout the states and territories in our nation to create organizations like NMPASI. So we're one of 57 organizations. Then we have the Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness Act. And again, this was created in 1986. It was one of the first programs to come to the CNMI, these two grants. And so since 1984 and 1986 is when the Protection and Advocacy programs came to the CNMI. Originally, they were administered by Catholic Social Services and then CARIDOT, and then it followed up by NMPASI in 1993. The Americans with Disabilities Act is the greatest law that we work with. This provides protections in areas such as employment, access to government services and programs, and accessibility to private entities throughout our community. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is where we do all of our work with the public school system and our students in special education. If there's ever been denial of services or some mistreatment going on if our students, our advocates go into the schools under this law. And then finally, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, specifically Section 504, which states that any entity receiving federal funds and they do not make, they must make their programs and services available to individuals with disabilities. Locally, we have some great laws that have been created that we go out and help the community with. The first is the Monumco Physical Abuse and Mental Cruelty Act. We do a lot of work with the aging office and with the Monumco there to ensure that they're being treated properly at home by care providers and whatnot. We do get calls from concerned family members, and we will go down and investigate to ensure they're not being abused or neglected by their care providers. So this really is where when we get in touch with our community at the home level. The Patients' Rights Act, because we do monitoring through the hospital, the psychiatric unit, we inform the individuals and the patients there that they do have rights as well as responsibilities when it comes to receiving the health care that they truly deserve. And then the last one up there is our Parking Access Act. I think the latest one we have is Public Law 19-79. I bring this law up in particular. It was originally amended, I believe, back in 2012. And there always seems to be some misunderstanding in terms of who enforces what through that law. The way the law is written, the Attorney General's office is the ones that ensures that businesses and government buildings and whatnot have the appropriate number and sizes of accessible parking, the blue spaces. The Department of Public Safety is the one who enforces violations to park in there if you don't have a placard. We do have individuals that come to our office quite often because businesses lack those parking stalls. And so unless we are representing an individual who's denied access to a store because of their parking, we do go in and we can represent them and provide information to the business, for example, of what the law says, how these spaces need to be marked up, how many there are. One part of this law too, though, is that since 2012, of all the tickets or whatnot that enforcement gets through DPS, 50% of that funding goes back into the general fund, 25% to DPS, and 25% is supposed to come to NMPASI. Since 2012, we've never seen anything from this law. It's still on the books there, but it's just interesting that I don't know if there's no parking tickets being issued or we're just left out of the equation in the end. But just something to make you all aware of. All right, finally, we have some contact info here, and then we will get possibly the Sergeant at Arms to distribute some materials we have for y'all that has this contact information as well, but we do have numbers. Our main office is here on Saipan, and then we are working with the local municipalities on Tinian and Rhoda, where we do have staff situated there. And then we can always be reached online through our website, www.nmpasi.com. And if you go to the staff page, that's all of our email address and everything can be located there. At this time, I want to say thank you. And if there's any questions that my staff or I can answer for you all, we do appreciate having some time this morning to meet with you all.
Thank you, Director Borja. Before we move forward, I'd also like to recognize the presence of our Vice Speaker, Joel Camacho, Representative Joel Camacho, and also the Chairman of SNILD. And I saw him writing down stuff when you said you received money from them. So I think he's doing the calculation of how much he's going to appropriate Representative John Paul Sablan. So members, the floor is open for questions. Recognize Representative Vincent Oran.
Good morning, Vincent Oran, and thank you guys so much for everything that you guys do for our disabled citizens. I commend you guys a lot. What do you guys have any privileges with CODA?
With the CODA, the Transportation Authority, correct? I'm sorry, what do you mean by privileges? Or
so I know that like in the States, right? And anybody that has a disability, they would usually get a card, that could avail on transportation, either cheap or free. Depending if the person has cannot get a job, doesn't have a job, right? And he needs to go to treatment. that, if the family doesn't have the transportation means, they would call, and they were able to be escorted to whatever facility that they need to go to get take do their appointment. And at the same time, if they do have a job, but they don't make a lot, that they can, they have a discount on their transportation, privileges.
Okay, I understand your meaning. We do not directly provide any funding assistance. We're restricted in terms of how we can utilize our money, but there are sources that we refer individuals with disabilities to. For example, if they're trying to get employed, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation can provide vouchers to get them to and from work or to classes at the college. And then CODA is actually the one that basically registers and um, all the individuals with disabilities, should they require the curbside to curbside transportation, is the primary one that they use. But us in particular, we don't provide any funding for passes or anything like that. We're unallowed. It's an unallowable cost through our funding. I hope that answers your question.
Just a quick question regarding the parking spaces. So it doesn't matter where the establishment is. I mean, I've had constituents ask me questions about this. Like, say, for example, um, there was a post shared on Facebook about a person parking at a blue space, but did not go to that establishment. That was the only parking available. That person has a placard, but goes to another establishment. Uh, so does that establishment, like, say if I have a store, I have my blue spaces, and then a person with a placard parks there but goes to the next establishment because the other blue spaces on that establishment is taken. As a store owner, I cannot say, excuse me, but this blue space is only for parking for my customers. Um,
Yeah, I understand your question. In that instance, just for some clarification, are the two stores like different buildings? Okay, so my understanding is as long as you do have a placard and you're utilizing that space, you're allowed to use it, even if it's the one over, because like you said, maybe there's only one. Now, like where our office is situated in Gualarai, we're in like a strip mall type building, and out of the 50 parking spaces, the two accessible spaces are right in front of our office. So no matter who needs whatever store they're going to, they just park in front of our office. That's also allowable. I mean, so that's where I feel it's allowable, but I can verify through our attorney just to make sure I don't give you any inaccurate information. Welcome.
recognize Representative Yankton.
Okay, in regards to the mental illness, I had an encounter with one of those guys. I don't know if he was totally psycho, but um, I was at a car wash in Garapan, and he came and was telling me about he stays in Garapan in an apartment. He receives Social Security, yet his power is out. And I don't know why he was telling me. So I went up to the one in Navy Hill. Are you affiliated with them, or is the one I forgot the name? Something home something.
The transitional living
Yes,
center.
yes.
Okay.
Okay. And they said they're not in charge of that, whatever problem they have. So but then they went and checked on that person. So who receives the Social Security? The apartment owner or the family members? Oh, thank you.
All right. Thank you for the question. It's really based on the individual. Without knowing who they are in particular, when someone receives Social Security benefits, it goes to them directly. Unless they are unable to manage that finances themselves, then it would go to a representative payee who helps manage it. Now, if they're the ones taking care of their own money, and their rent is say $200, that's their responsibility to pay the rent. It's also their responsibility to, if the power is separate, from the apartment, because some apartments are like that. So that would be on their responsibility. There is one apartment I know that the owner of the apartment is helping some people that are receiving mental health services. And what she does is she does collect. She is not the representative payee. However, she collects money from them every month to pay for their rent, pay for their power, pay for their food and hygienes and all that stuff. But she works out a budget with them on a monthly basis, and that's how it operates. And so they're supposed to follow that. If that's not happening, that's where our office can come in and investigate misuse of funds through our thank you through our representative payee program. Now, if they, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So if they want legal protections for it, now the Transitional Living Center, they have social workers at their day program. And so those social workers do work with those individuals hand in hand on a regular basis. So that's why they might be more familiar with their living arrangements and their how they're receiving their finances. So going to the Transitional Living Center TLC is appropriate because again, they do work with the outpatients quite often. Our office where we could step in is if there is abuse, financial abuse or neglect. Like if I did pay the landlord money for my utilities and they're not paying out the utilities, those are some of the investigations we can do on our side. And then we can always file charges in through court if needed for remedy.
Thank you. But again, his mental illness, so I don't know if he was telling me the truth or just telling stories. Thank you.
Representative Roman Benevienti.
Thank you, Mr. Borja. It's just I know you're faced with a lot of challenges as far as the financial challenges that to operate the office and everything. But if you explore resorting towards trying to find some uh, office space up here or Navy Hill, government building where you can try to instead of leasing the property down there, maybe it's more ideal for you to save some funding as much as possible. It's not that we are not saying that we don't want to support your your office, but we would also like to see that uh, if we can be more sensitive in our operations and everything. I know that the challenges, like I said, I know the challenges is the finances that you're being faced with. So, and I think PSS should really get more on detail with you with regards to the funding, because I know there are almost it's a duplication of process that NMPASI is doing, while PSS also is and they're receiving grants with it. So I know you've been aboard. You're still probably aboard, and I think you should explore that area. Thank you.
Just to address to those. I would say it's probably about 3 or 4 years ago. Our former director did start negotiating with the administration in terms of trying to secure a property up here in Capitol Hill or Navy Hill, even at the lower housing there in Garapan. That never really came through. And I think one of the major barriers that we faced was because, again, the restrictions based on our funding, we can't renovate, we can't use it for major renovations. And if some of those places that they wanted to offer us, there's no doors, no lights, no windows, and we can't use our funding to purchase those things with the federal funds. So that is something that we have looked at in the past, and I would love to work with the current administration to see if there is something a little bit more already completed that we could possibly move into. I think it's great because we are doing the same thing on Tinian and Rhoda with working with the municipality. We use the municipal council building on Tinian, and we're using a space at the courthouse on Rhoda. With regards to the funding that the education system gets, PSS, the way our office works with them primarily too is if they're not providing the appropriate services to students with disabilities, that's where we step in, and so we don't share funds in that same lines, but they receive specific money to provide services to kids that are in the special education. And if they're misusing that money, they do have their own federal oversight, but our office can come in if we have a person that says, look, I was supposed to get a wheelchair, for example, and the school system's not providing it for me. We can fight for that from our end. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Beneventi. Any other member?
So I am the chairman for PUTC, and DPW does fall under my jurisdiction. And I do agree with you that the parking stalls are lacking, on a lot of businesses, and I know by experience that and I will pay a visit to Public Works, soon enough, to address that one particular issue. But right now, like, I'm trying to work with CUC and trying to, help out with CUC issue because God knows we all need it. Not just you guys, but everybody that's pretty much in this building. So, but I do know for a fact that sometimes public work falls short on executing their duties, and one of that is to enforce the ADA on a lot of businesses. I could take you out to a store right now, not too far from here, and their parking is dangerous for somebody that's in a wheelchair, or they need some sort of assistance, walking, because their parking lot is all full of cracks and holes, and all they need is just one incident, and they could shut that whole business down. So instead of them trying to make that initial investment on just taking care of it, but yet at the same time for public works to do inspections, that's where we're lacking. It's the government, not going out there doing what they're supposed to do to ensure the safety of the community, be it disabled or not. So we will be looking into that. Yeah.
Um, I'm glad you brought up DPW. That's been one of the interesting collaborations that we have, that organization, because a lot of times, even with the new construction buildings that go up, second, two-story or more buildings, and they don't have elevator, ramp, nothing to that effect, which they should. But then the DPW staff is the one coming to our organization asking whether or not it complies with the ADA. And we really don't have certified people at our organization. We can read the law, read the guidelines, but we're not the ones supposed to sign off on anything. But a lot of times they've come in and asked me to sign off, and I said, I cannot. That's not my role here. So again, those were some issues we had, as little as like 2 years ago. And then even when you go to their main office, they have people with disabilities in their organization, and the broken elevator. How do those employees get into the office? They're using a wheelchair or using a walker. So anyway, I found it interesting that the organization that ensures that places are compliant with accessibility is not accessible to their own employees. And I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus. It was just some observations we had 2 years ago from that particular department. But thank you for looking into those.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Floor is still open, members. Recognize Vice Speaker Camacho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, Mr. Bora. Just a question. Earlier, you mentioned that you guys function out of 100% federal funds. Is that correct? Is there like a grant cycle that you guys have to keep reapplying to stay open?
Yes. So our grant cycle is the federal fiscal year from October 1st through September 30th. And then we have reporting requirements due the 30th of December every year. And as long as we submit our program performance report along with our federal financial reporting, and then there is an application that we submit also around September 1st, the funding just continues. The CNMI is allocated a certain percentage amongst what the total funds are throughout the nation. And so that's why some of our programs, when I showed the dollar figures, some of them are very low for some of our programs, just because I guess it's based on population. But yes, because of the nature of the way the the grants work. As long as we submit our requirements on an annual basis, the funding continues to come to us. We do hit that time after the beginning of the fiscal year where from October 1st to maybe like this time in January, we may not get our appropriations from the different departments in the federal government. So we always build in a carryover to ensure that we can cover vendor expenses and salary in the meantime. So we do always have an overlap of funding throughout each grant cycle. We're allowed 2 years to spend down our grants for any given year. So money we received last year in 2022, we have until the end of 2024 to spend all that money down. And some of our programs, we basically spend all our money within 1 year. It's unavoidable. I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you. That does. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative John Paul.
Thank you, Quick, and for your team for coming and giving us a presentation. Sorry for being late. But just a follow-up question on our Vice Speaker's line of questions. These grants that you guys receive annually, are they competitive grants or they're not?
No, sir, they're not competitive at all. Each state and territory receives a specific amount through the formula. And so there's funding that goes out to all 57 organizations.
Okay, thank you for that response. And with the appropriation that you guys receive from the SNIO, can you just repeat what did you guys use it for so far? And are you already in the verge of depleting that funding provided?
Yes. Thank you again. So what we used, we received $105,000 last year, and through one of our programs, because of certain restrictions, especially on our indirect costs in terms of us, what we can pay for our utilities again and our rent, that's where we're utilizing those funds for, is through that. And we also had an issue last year when we first received the money with the renewal of our unique entity identifier, which is a number that you have to receive federal money. And so we went 3 months without being able to draw down any of our funds from the Fed at all. And so that money was used to help cover costs through that period until we got that that funding resecured. And so currently, I believe we have a balance of 90,000 left over from that funding, because we did replace it once we had access to our federal grants. We were able to replace most of it. But again, we have one program who disallows a lot of our costs. And so those funds are also used to help cover those shortfalls at any given pay period.
Yeah. So thank you for that response. And I know that we normally in the delegation, we try to put provisions that are very flexible for every agencies that we try our best to assist. So maybe you guys can utilize it for maybe even vouchers or even for like payment for quota vehicles if needed for your clientele. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Floor is still open. Representative Manny.
So your grant doesn't allow you to renovate buildings, government buildings, but does it allow? It does allow rental, right? Just as a possibility, perhaps maybe we could, as an option, maybe we could look into one of the government agencies charging you rent so that they can help renovate the building and then giving it free for life later on. I don't know which agency is going to take up that task, but maybe DPL or NMHC. It's kind of hard, but just another avenue.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. We will definitely look into the possibility of doing that.
All right, thank you, colleagues. Yes, Representative Yanktamay.
Sorry. Do you have Carolinian clients? Are they called clients or? Yes. And you said you have 12 personnel.
Yes.
Of these 12, how many speak Carolinian?
Currently one.
Okay.
We had more in the past, however, due to personal reasons, death and whatnot, we lost some of our Carolinian speakers. But Elsie Tillepower, our program manager, she wasn't able to make it with us today. She's our primary resource. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Yankton. Representative Manglonia.
I just want to say thank you for your time. It was very insightful. I always kind of wondered what NMPASI's role was with OVR and the rest of the other, DD council. So I thank you for your time and giving us this presentation. We really appreciate it, and our doors are always open to help with whatever you may need.
Thank you, Representative Manglonia. Any other member? We good? Good. All right. Director Borja and your team, thank you very much for this morning. Definitely very informative for us, and also, help clarifying some of the issues and the role of NMPASI. And like Representative Manglonia said, our doors are open. And like the chairman said too, his pocket is open. I'm just kidding. And we're definitely here to assist, and we thank you for the job that you do in our community. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And again, thank you.